So look at Anthony Ryder from South Lyon, Michigan, recently selected as the Lions 2020 Fan of the Year. He has a passion about sports broadcasting.
With the 112th selection in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, USC. One pride, baby! Yeah!
The Detroit Lions do not have a very strong defense. They really haven't had a great defense in over half a decade from before Matt Patricia took over, but there is a little bit of hope for this defense. Over the last couple of weeks, really the last month or so, we have talked extensively about this Detroit Lions defense, a defense that hasn't been very good historically under Aaron Glenn. In his first year, they ranked at the very bottom of the league, and in his second year, they ranked just above very bottom of the league at 31st in the NFL. So going into the year 3, a lot of people had some expectations. They thought that the pass rush was going to be much improved. They thought that the secondary was going to be much improved after putting in pick after pick after pick into this defense and spending some really big money in free agency. A lot of people thought that this defense and this year was going to be the year the Detroit Lions returned to having some elite defense. And unfortunately, that hasn't happened. As I said, we've talked a lot about this defense over the last month or so. We've talked a lot about its problems. We've talked a lot about how they just quite honestly aren't very good. And today we're going to take a look, much like we did with the offense yesterday, at this defense and kind of talk about how to fix it, how to improve it. But we've already kind of done that. So instead of going over the issues yet again, instead of kind of taking a look and just repeating from the video we made a couple of days ago, I'm going to actually take a different approach here because I do think Aaron Glenn has started to make some improvements to this defense. And I do think that Aaron Glenn, especially over the last couple of weeks, has actually made some solid improvements to his defensive unit that have led to the Detroit Lions having some stronger defensive performances versus the New Orleans Saints and the Chicago Bears than they had about 3 to 4 weeks ago versus the Bears and the Packers. So I'm going to take a look at, first off, just how this defense is overall, what Aaron Glenn has done over the last 2 weeks to slightly improve this defense, and what he can continue to do so that the defense continues to take steps forward as we approach the playoffs, so that hopefully come playoff time in a month from today, the Detroit Lions have a defense that they can at least be proud of and a defense that they know is not going to be a liability come January and potentially February. So with that being said, let's kick it off today by talking about the Detroit Lions' problems on defense. So overall in the season, at a very basic surface level, the Detroit Lions do not seem like that poor of a defense. Ranking 15th in yards, 19th against the pass, 9th against the run, and 25th overall in points allowed per game. It is certainly not a good defense by the Detroit Lions, but it is a top 10 run defense. It is a top 15 defense overall as far as yards allowed. And even though they are 25th in points per game allowed, that is a significant upgrade from where they were a year ago. And certainly an upgrade of where they started 2 years ago at the beginning of this rebuild. So you might look at it and say, okay, well, they're not that bad, right? They're not great, but they're not nearly as bad as some people are making them out to be. But I think a lot of the defense's issues really come from somewhere behind the scenes stat, more so than just a simple points per game or yards per game allowed. Taking a look at some of the more advanced stats, taking a look at some of the more in-depth look at this defense, the defense really struggles to make plays, and they really struggle to create negative plays. They really struggle to create turnovers. They really struggle to get off the field in crucial downs. So while the defense is actually quite good on first and second down, third down, red zone downs, and the ability to create negative plays is really where this defense needs to take a step forward. The defense ranks just 25th in the NFL in sacks, despite ranking relatively high in pressures created. They do not finish plays very well, and they are ranking 25th in the NFL in sacks for a defense. They rank 26th in the NFL in takeaways. That is a significant downgrade from where they were a season ago. Last year, I believe they ranked top 15, if not top 10 in takeaways as a defense, and this year it has been a huge drop-off from that standpoint. They also rank 25th in the NFL in third down conversions over the last month. They have allowed so many third and longs, so many opportunities. And although I don't know the exact number for third and long, I do know that the Detroit Lions are about a 70% conversion rate over the last month, and a large majority of those have been 3rd and 8 or longer, which as of last year, offenses were converting at about a 20% rate. As of right now, I would guess that around 50, if not higher, were being converted on the Detroit Lions defense. So their biggest issue right now is getting off the field on third down. And oddly enough, they struggle on third and long a lot more than they struggle on third and short. On third and short, a lot of teams try to run the ball, make it simple, just trust their guys, trust their talent to go get the job done. And typically, the Detroit Lions have done a good job stopping that. Their top run defense has stopped a lot of third and short, fourth and short opportunities. But when it comes to 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10, even all the way back to 3rd and 15 or 16, the Detroit Lions drop back into coverage. The pass rush has to take over, and a team that ranks 25th in sacks and 26th in takeaways, being forced to cover for a long time, especially against mobile quarterbacks, typically does not go well for the Detroit Lions. So their third down conversion rate is about 70% over the last 3 games, and that ranks 25th in the NFL. And their red zone efficiency has dropped to 29th in the NFL, allowing over 80% over the last 5 games. And it really has struggled for a majority of the year. But over the last month and a half, going back to about the Chargers game, it has really been a major issue for Aaron Glenn and the defense. But I did mention that they have been improving over the last couple of weeks. So taking a look at what we said a few days ago, talking about this defense, just gonna a quick recap of the problems this defense was facing. There was 3 main ones: personnel issues, usage issues, and scheme issues. Who was on the field, how those players on the field were being utilized, and what the scheme was doing to help those players thrive and succeed as an entire team as opposed to just individuals. Now, as far as personnel, we talked a lot about which players should play less and which players should play more. And for the most part, actually, that has come true. We talked a lot about how Ifeatu Melifonwu should be playing, how he was great versus Atlanta. He was really good versus Green Bay. And against the Chicago Bears, he played 99% of defensive snaps for the team and looked really good. At a 4th down stop all on his own, allowed just 1 completion for 11 yards through the air. He was a great safety for the Detroit Lions in that game. We talked about Josh Paschal, a player that was a former 2nd-round pick and has had significantly more production than guys like Isaiah Buggs and Benito Jones and John Kaminsky, and yet was playing just 20% of snaps. Well, over the last 2 games, he's averaging about 40 to 50% of snaps, as last week versus the Chicago Bears, he played 44% of snaps, 31 opportunities. And even though he didn't have a sack, didn't have a major, huge game-breaking play, he was really good for the Detroit Lions on the interior, and he was a positive force on the defensive line that helped the Detroit Lions have one of their better defensive stands over the last couple of months. And then another player we talked about was Julian Okwara, a player that has 3 sacks in just under 100 defensive snaps. He's been really good. Last week played just a little bit more, played 24% of snaps, 17 total snaps on the day. And even though he wasn't elite, even though he wasn't a game changer, he did have a sack on Justin Fields. It didn't count. It should have been an intentional grounding, but he made that play completely by himself. And then once again, was put back on the bench. So it's not perfect, right? I still think Julian Okwara could play more. I still think they could utilize and use some other guys better, but they are putting some playmakers on the field. Jalen Reeves-Maybin's another guy. After the Saints game, I came out and said, hey, they need to put Jalen Reeves-Maybin on for some blitz packages. He was really good in coverage. He's really quick off the snap. And what turns out, they put him in on a blitz package, and he got a sack on 3rd down for Justin Fields. Didn't take them out of field goal range, but ended a really tough drive, essentially giving the Detroit Lions a little bit of life, only putting them down 10 as opposed to 14. And then on the flip side, we had guys saying that, hey, Tracy Walker should play a little bit less. And Tracy Walker actually went from a lot of snaps a game, about 70% of snaps per game, to 0. Didn't play a single defensive snap for the Detroit Lions, which isn't necessarily what I meant when I said he should play less, but it is a good thing that I think Ifeatu is playing more snaps than Tracy Walker now. Another guy, Jerry Jacobs, has significantly struggled this year on the boundary as a cornerback. So the Detroit Lions brought somebody else in. They brought in Kendall Victor, who didn't, again, play more than Jerry Jacobs. Jerry Jacobs still played 75% of snaps, but on just a few days of preparation, they had Kendall Victor come in and play 24% of snaps on the boundary, taking a lot of time away from Jerry Jacobs, which again led to some positive impact on the Detroit Lions. Obviously, Jerry still played quite a bit. Unfortunately, gave up the 4th and 13 touchdown that essentially iced the game for the Detroit Lions on defense. But putting Jerry on a little bit less and finding somebody else who can hold their own on the boundary was a big thing for the Detroit Lions, and they did it. I said it would have been Ifeatu Melifonwu. They found somebody else, but the point and the general idea was still generally correct. As far as usage, you have guys like Jack Campbell now playing a purely Mike linebacker position, as opposed to playing edge rusher, as opposed to having his hand in the dirt at certain times, as opposed to not being as a natural position. And over the last 2 games, he's played a purely Mike linebacker, and he's looked really good. I think has had 2 of his best games as a rookie against the Saints and the Bears this last time around. And especially going back and taking a look at the first Bears game opposed to the second Bears game, Jack Campbell has taken tremendous strides and become a significantly better player. Josh Paschal is now being used primarily as an interior pass rusher, an interior defensive lineman, which is where he really continues to look good. And then again, Julian Okwara, a player that I keep bringing up because he keeps making plays, played just 17 snaps, but had a major impact play on the day, and what could have been a huge defensive turning point had the referees got it right and Aiden Hutchinson not jumped off sides in the final minutes, final seconds of that 4th and 13 hard count. Julian Okwara potentially could have made the defensive play of the game and still was super impactful on the 17 snaps that he did end up playing. Now, as far as the scheme goes, I don't think there have been any major changes to the scheme, but I do think Aaron Glenn has shown quite a bit of an ability to both game plan as well as make adjustments. Now, they weren't in the same game, but they were both showed over the last 2 weeks. As the New Orleans Saints' first 3 drives, they really had nothing going. Aaron Glenn game planned really well, came out, has defense ready to play, and the Lions defense looked elite for the first quarter before the New Orleans Saints made adjustments. Now, unfortunately, once those adjustments were made, Aaron Glenn's defense went back to looking like some Swiss cheese, and they almost blew that game and blew a 21-point lead to the New Orleans Saints. But it started really well, and the game plan and the execution of said game plan was really, really well. They came out the next week versus the Chicago Bears. The game plan clearly wasn't very good. The Chicago Bears drove up and down the field for back-to-back drives, but in the second quarter, Aaron Glenn made some adjustments, and the defense for about the second quarter to about midway through the third, even at the end of the third quarter, looked really, really strong, and they got off the field on 3rd down. They got off the field on 4th down. They gave the offense multiple opportunities to get back on the field and take the lead, and I actually think the defense was the better unit versus the Chicago Bears because of the adjustments made by Aaron Glenn at halftime and in the second quarter. Now, there were still obviously some poor defensive plays out there. Obviously, the stunt that apparently Aiden Hutchinson was allowed to call by himself at the end of the game led to that last touchdown. I think that the 4th and 3rd jumping off sides was really bad. Partially a coaching issue, partially a player issue. So there are still some adjustments to be made. There are still some scheme things to figure out. But I do think, again, for the second week in a row, the Detroit Lions have taken a small step forward as a defensive unit, but they're not there yet. They were better, but they weren't great. Still 2 bottom scoring offenses in the NFL in New Orleans and Chicago. Putting up 28 points a week is not ideal. So what can the Detroit Lions continue to do to keep this defense improving and maybe not have it as an elite defense come playoff, but again, having it as a defense that you can put on the field and trust that they're not going to be a liability and they're going to at least give you some opportunities to get off the field and win some football games? Well, I still think utilization of players can improve. While I think it's taken a step forward, I think it can take more steps forward. Julian Okwara, in my opinion, should be playing a lot more. Maybe not 90, 100% of the snaps like Aiden Hutchinson, but somewhere in the 50s, the 60s, give him 20, 30 opportunities a game. And obviously, they're not always going to be pass rushing situations, but give him opportunities. Give Julian Okwara about 50, half the snap count, because a guy who's on 17 snaps a game is getting you about 1 sack every 25 snaps. That guy can get you 2 to 3 sacks potentially if he's playing 50 snaps a game. So put him on the field more. Kendall Victor, again, I know was a very recent addition. He only played 24% of snaps this week as well, but he was pretty good in the snaps that he played. I believe was targeted once and did not give up a catch. He, I think, looks better than Jerry Jacobs on the boundary, so put him on the boundary with a little bit more time to learn the playbook. Of course, I think he will gradually get more of a role, so this isn't so much of an indictment on Aaron Glenn so much as what I think he needs to continue doing. And Kendall Victor should see the field more. Jalen Reeves-Maybin, if he's going to be the only linebacker making plays, put him on the field to go make plays. If he's going to be the guy next to Jack Campbell that can get through the line of scrimmage, that can create pressure, that can cover and actually tackle players, put him on the field. If Alex Anzalone can't do it, I know he's making a lot of money. I know he's a team captain. I know he's loved in the locker room. But if Jalen Reeves-Maybin is going to outplay him, put him on the field to make some plays. Brian Branch played just 52% of snaps, played just over half the snaps for the Detroit Lions. And for your best secondary player to play almost just half, barely half the snaps in a football game for you, that isn't good. That guy needs to play more. And I know Aaron Glenn came out and said, well, we wanted him to focus on slot cornerback because that's where he's been best. I understand that. But if it's not a nickel situation, Brian Branch should still be out there. Brian Branch should still be an impact player every single snap of the football game that he is available. And he should be right up there with Kirby Joseph, right up there with Ifeatu Melifonwu with those 70, 65 snaps a game. He should be playing 90 to 100% of snaps because he is the best secondary player you have. So if you're playing in the nickel, you put him as a slot defender. If you're playing in base, put him as that second safety. Put him at linebacker. You could even put him at edge if you really wanted to, because he's shown the ability to actually create a little bit of pressure coming off the edge. Put your best players on the field and they will continue to make plays. And then the last guy I'm going to talk about is Bruce Irvin, a player that, again, had 11 snaps versus the New Orleans Saints. Not a large sample size, but came away with 2 quarterback hits and a sack and was super impactful in that game, was for some reason not called up versus the Chicago Bears. Neither was Quentin Bohanna, a player that has actually been quite good for the Detroit Lions over the last month or so. So again, I think the defense has made some proper strides. I do like that they're getting Julian Okwara involved more. I do like that they're getting, Kendall Victor in to play the boundary. I do like that they're getting Josh Pascal to play a lot. I do like that some things are happening and that the defense actually is taking some strides forward, is actually showing signs of life, but I still think there's a ways to go. Aaron Glenn is about 2 steps into this journey, and I think the journey is going to be about 15, 20, maybe even more steps. So he's part of the way there. He's getting there, but he does need to show some more improvement over the next month. And hopefully, again, going into the playoffs, the defense can be at least serviceable. Hopefully, Ifeatu can play a lot more come playoff time. Hopefully, they can figure out how to use guys like Josh Pascal properly. Hopefully, they can continue to use Brian Branch more and more. Hopefully they can implement some pass rush packages with both Julian and Bruce Irvin on the field. Maybe kick Hutchinson inside and have them on the edge. The two bendy guys on the edge with the 2 powerful guys in the middle could be a really fun pass rushing opportunity for them. There is talent on this defense, and I think Aaron Glenn maybe resentfully, maybe not willingly, but is starting to make some changes and is starting to figure out how to use his guys slightly better. And I think the process needs to continue if the Detroit Lions want to actually have a chance at winning and hosting some playoff games. So with that being said, that is how I would go about fixing the defense. I think Aaron Glenn is taking proper steps forward, but I think he needs to continue to do so and potentially do it a little bit faster because the playoffs are fastly approaching. You have 4 tough games to end the season, and you need to go about 2-2 to guarantee your spot in the playoffs and guarantee you're hosting a playoff game come January. So with that being said, that's all I got for you guys today. Let me know down in the comments below what you think about this defense. Do you think it's improving? Do you think it's still just as bad as it was a couple months ago? Let me know down in the comments below. I'd be very curious what you guys have to say. But with all that being said, that is all for you guys right now. Thank you all so very much for watching. And until next time, and as always, go Lions.